Please join me in welcoming Jason. Yay!
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being with us again. And I'd like to invite our panel come up on stage, just kind of get right to it. First panelist we have here is Mr. Calvin Butler from Baltimore Gas and Electric. We got Jeff Bailey from CGI. We got Cris Eugster from CPS Energy. So we kind of just want to jump right into it. I just want to start with Cris and come down the line here. So you can just talk about what you do, what your role is in the company, and then also sort of set the stage when we're talking about this culture of innovation, and then also playing off what Christine talked about this morning. How did you get into energy, and what did you want to be when you grew up? So.
Okay, I'll have to try to remember that last one. My name's Cris Eugster. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for CPS Energy. I work for Paula Gold-Williams, our CEO. I love working in the industry. I love working at CPS Energy. We are the largest municipally owned gas electric utility in the country. So we are a big player. We've got physical plants. We've got over 20 physical plants with coal, gas, nuclear, renewables in our portfolio. We're the third largest power producer in Texas. We serve over 1.4 million customers. So part of what excites me about what we're doing in San Antonio is if we can get it right with that size and scale, we can do it for the rest of Texas. We can set an example for the rest of the country. And so we're very excited about our path forward. I think we've talked a lot about the changing landscape. We recognize that we've got to change. We are moving from a kilowatt hour electron provider, commodity provider, to something that is much more of a service provider where we are powering businesses to power their dreams. Whether you're in the restaurant business or you're in the hotel business or you're a homeowner, a renter, we want to enable you to take whatever you're doing in life further. So we're very excited about that. And your last question?
How did you get into energy, and what did you want to be when you grew up?
So I have had a very circuitous route to the energy business. I've been at CPS Energy about 9 years. I did a PhD in electrical engineering, so I'm an engineer through and through and through. I thought I was going to become a professor. Ended up going to work for McKinsey and Company for about 9-10 years there. Ended up working for Bill White, the mayor of Houston, as a sustainability policy person on his team. And that kind of got me into the public sector and joined CPS Energy about 9 years ago and have loved it every moment of it.
Thank you, Cris. Jeff?
So I think I'm going to start with your second question first.
Perfect.
Because I know exactly what I wanted to be. I was going to be a professional soccer player. And if that didn't work, I was going to be a drummer in a rock band.
All right.
And that's exactly...
That's solid number two.
Yeah. And that's
solid number two.
Solid number two. And I think that's exactly how I ended up in IT.
Excellent.
I work with CGI. I've been with the company about 23 years. I've been part of some research that CGI is doing specifically around innovation in organizations. And so I've done a lot of work in different utility places, but also other industry segments. So very interested in the topic, excited to have a chance to talk to co-panelists here. So I think it's going to be a very interesting topic, so I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Calvin?
So first, thank you, Jason. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to ETS for the invite. Calvin Butler, I have the pleasure of being CEO of Baltimore Gas and Electric. Put that in perspective for you. BGE is the first gas utility company in the nation, 202 years old, founded right there in Baltimore, Maryland. And we're part of Exelon Company, which is headquartered in Chicago, which, if you put it in perspective, we're one of 4 utilities, and we serve the Mid-Atlantic from D.C., Maryland, to Philadelphia, down to Jersey, through our associated utilities, and of course, our sister company, ComEd, in Chicago. So 10 million electric and gas customers combined. We operate on all channels of the energy cycle, from nuclear to wind to solar, and to the competitive market through our sister company, Constellation. I've been at the company for 10 years. I'm a lawyer by training. I'm reformed. So the question, so I got into this amazingly right out of law school. My mentor was CEO of a utility company in Peoria, Illinois, where I went to undergrad at Bradley University. Went to Bradley to play baseball. I wanted to be a professional baseball player. And it's amazing when you realize you can't hit a collegiate level curve, what did it do for you? And so I said, okay, my default position, I wanted to be on the Today Show. I wanted to replace Bryant Gumbel. That didn't happen either. So I said, all right, I'm going to go to law school. So, it's been a wonderful journey. But going to the earlier conversation, how I got into the energy industry, it was because someone early on who I looked up to decided to mentor me, and he was the CEO. If you'd have told me 20-some years ago that I would be a CEO of a utility company, I'd have said, no way. But it's because I saw it done, and I recognized the changes and the impact. So right out of law school, had the opportunity to go straight to work for them, and then I left the industry for 9 years to go into the printing industry. And then they brought me back into the energy industry with Exelon. And it's been an amazing piece. But what I've learned is that each time I've come back to the industry, it's been a time of change. Yes. In the mid-'90s, it was deregulation. And now we sit back and we're talking about distributed generation, technology, impacting our business and how we're going. And that's what excites me. Yeah. And so when I talk to people about getting involved, that's the conversation. I said, you have a chance right now in our industry to shape it, what it's going to be for generations to come. So thank you.
Thank you. So I think that really goes to the heart of what we're talking about, getting people involved in transformation, new ideas, and just bringing not just ideas, but new people into this industry and transforming even some of the current people we have in this industry. So I want to go start off with this as a key question. So how do utilities embed this innovation into their current utility culture? And we'll start with Cris.
Well, I think it starts with the mindset. I mean, I'd say 5, maybe 10 years ago, the utility industry really had its head stuck in the sand. I mean, it really just did not get it. You'd go to conferences, you'd hear about kind of why you'd want to do it this way versus that way. I think the industry at large has gotten it. So I think that's the first step to recovery is you admit that maybe your way wasn't working. So I think that's a big step. And you can say it at different levels within the company, but when you see that mindset shift all the way through the company, from senior leadership to the guy working the coal yard, I mean, it's a pretty transformative step to get that mindset change across the company. And then I think it's what we've done at CPS Energy under Paula's People First leadership is to really unleash the talent of individuals and people in the company. And you'd be amazed how many ideas are out there that just, if you got a way to structure and foster them and get them to kind of a day of light, it's huge. It gets people engaged, it gets people excited. Everyone is opportunity driven, whether it's taking on a new role in the company, whether it's being on a Tiger team, whether it's, participating with a new product or service. I think that opportunity-rich environment really does transform people. So now you've got a system that gets it, and now you got people engaged, and you got people, starting to kind of have skin in the game, and then it starts to kind of momentum on that. So that's what we've seen at CPS Energy.
So I'm going to piggyback off of what Cris has said, and I think it starts with leadership, that encouraging people to engage. And what I've learned is that we had to really take a step back. Keep in mind, 202 years. What I love about BGE is that you could walk into any room and you have 30, 40, 50-year employees, second and third-year generation in a meeting, and they're engaging and they love it here. The challenge is you have 30 to 40 to 50-year employees that are ready to engage, and because they get fixed in how they've done it, and it's worked for them. So what's the need for them to change? What's the need for them to think differently? And so I had to take a step with my leadership team and explain the why. We had to connect the dots of why the change was even necessary, why our customers have different expectations of the utility today than they did yesterday. And what we did, to be honest with you, we created what we call our themes of the year. And we started last year, we had Energy to Innovate. And we said, we created this innovation portal where we encourage all level of employees to submit ideas. And so all these ideas, and they were like, and the first thought was, now what? They didn't think we were serious about it. So these ideas, we had over 550 ideas submitted last year. And then what we did, we started funding those ideas through a committee process of their peers. So we funded over 20 ideas last year for well over $1 million. Oh. Small bets to sit back and say, are we changing the processes and how we're connecting to our customers? Is it making the lives of our customers easier? Is it getting lights on and get quicker gas flowing? And then this year, they said, okay, is this a one-year wonder? Is it a one-hit? We said, no. This year, our theme was innovation at work. We're going to show you that the everyday processes that you're engaged in matter. So that's the whole innovation at work. But I think the biggest piece for us was taking a step back, connecting the dots, and explaining the why. And we talk about it every chance we get, and we're now seeing that energy created around the organization about, hey, we are different than we were. We are a different organization because our customers are recognizing that for us as well.
Yeah. And Jeff, sort of just to spin that a little differently, because you work with both utilities that are highly innovative, and then you have some that are a little slow moving. So can you give a little contrast to you have two innovators on stage, but some of the struggles you see, and maybe I wouldn't call it a struggle, the challenges of starting from ground zero, and share some of those lessons learned in working with those types of companies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, at its foundation, one of the challenges that we see fairly regularly is that organizations need to understand that innovation is not something else you do. It is what you do.
Exactly.
And that's a mental leap that some organizations can't take because they always see this innovation thing as this separate thing. And in some cases, it does by necessity. You obviously have innovators and early adopters, but if you focus on that group, if you believe the theory of innovation, you're at any point only touching about 15% of your organization. So, what are you doing purposefully to make that notion of we are innovators across the board more pervasive across the organization, and what are the things you do to encourage that diffusion of innovation? I think it's probably one of the biggest challenges we see.
Excellent. So starting with that word of innovation, and to innovate always involves some level of failure. So for utilities, you guys just talked about some programs, and I know CPS has similar programs that you do. Calvin just had a great example. But is there a right mix that you go in there and say, what level of failure are we going to tolerate with some of these new ideas we're bringing to the table, to where we don't set the stage where it's just piloting, so you build, not just the customers know that we're really trying to push the industry forward and make their lives better, but internally, your internal workforce also knows that we're going to try some things and we're going to learn as we go. So tell us, what's that right balance, and what do we recommend to the folks in the audience? And I'll start with Calvin on this one.
First thing I think for us is celebrate the successes. Let everyone know what you're doing. Put it out there, promote it, whether it's a former meter reader that's moved into a new position. Let everybody know what this individual suggested and how we rewarded their suggestions. And then at the second time, when we do have a failure, we talk about it. We bring it into the room and we say, what happened? What didn't we do correctly? What could we do to change it? Wasn't that it was a bad idea? Was it about execution? Was it about implementation of that idea? Where did it break down? And we also want to take the term, those lessons learned. We do it just like we do at a utility. You do the root cause analysis, you go through the process, and you treat it as part of the business. And at the end of the day, we measure it. We measure everything we do because that's how we know if we're trending in the right direction. And we really try to integrate it in all of our processes, where it's not, I love the way you just said, it's not standalone. It's part of how we do business each and every day. So the biggest thing, celebrate the successes. Talk about the failures. You do not talk about them in the sense to embarrass a person. You talk about it and say, okay, what did we as an organization fall short? Because obviously, if we thought it was a good idea and we funded it, there's something that broke down within how we may have been executing it, and what did we learn from it? Because the learnings in those failures are just as powerful as if it was successful.
Excellent. Cris?
Yeah, look, I think two things. One is, one of the things I tell my teams is you can't just say no. You can't just get stuck on no. And, being in a sort of risk-averse culture, no is a very easy answer. Here's why we can't do that. I've always told all my team members, whoever I work with, you can say no, you can bring up the issue, but you got to bring up a solution too. You got to bring a solution to the table as well. So I think that's kind of a mindset that we practice at CPS Energy. We're very solutions focused. I'd say kind of at a strategic level, the industry is very risk averse. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity to figure this one out. We play defensive ball. We don't play offense. We play defense. And we got to figure out how to play offense if we're going to, win in some of these new markets areas. And so to do that, we have to have a different mindset. We got to understand risk better. We got to understand the risk-reward trade-off. And so I think there's a much more sophisticated approach to how does the utility industry think about risk? Because we'll never be able to kind of check every box off. We're going to have to take a leap of faith in doing something. That is very foreign for a utility company to do, to take a leap of faith. We don't do that. So I think being more aspirational and thinking about taking chances in a very methodical way, I think is some real upside for the industry.
I think this is a hugely interesting topic because, I've heard multiple people mention, failing. And to some degree, I'm a big believer in that we need to kind of change our lexicon because especially in utilities that has such a connotation that it can be, counterproductive from the get-go. I also am very interested in this, in the risk-averse culture. What we work with people to understand is that if you live in a risk-averse culture, one of the things that you need to do is think about a different way of mitigating that risk. And in fact, if you talk to people who are into extreme programming and talk about agile, Scrum, those kind of things, that iterative process really is meant to not fail. I mean, everybody says, fail fast, but it's really about, to me, I look at it as bad news early is good news. Meaning what I want to know is, what do I need to correct as early in my process as possible? And in fact, that is the best way to mitigate risk. So, the notion of bad news early is good news in a risk-averse culture really goes hand in hand because that is one of my best ways of managing that risk. Good point.
Yeah, just to jump on that a little bit, I mean, people say fail fast, fail forward. I don't know if I'm all that excited about failing fast a lot, but I like what you're saying is, we need to have more dynamic plans. Utilities are very, project management. Here's a spreadsheet with 1,000 different milestones, and you're stuck with that path. But things are going to change. You're going to learn. You're going to make some mistakes. But if you can adapt and you can change that plan, I think you get kind of what you're talking about.
So the challenge is we're still an organization made up of engineers. And engineers by nature are going to give you a 100-page analysis on everything. And it's difficult for them to sit back and say, hey, you don't know everything about a process, but we need to move.
Right.
And that is where our challenge as an organization is going, when is enough, and let's making that first step. Going to your point is that we'll gain information and knowledge along the way, but we have to go.
Right.
Because if we choose to wait until we know everything, it's too late.
Too late.
And that is the opportunity for us.
Absolutely.
I absolutely agree. And just to kind of continue that thought, it's very interesting that even for those engineers, that mindset is very difficult to change.
It is.
But it is if you're purposeful about it. So
we're going to set up our skydiving classes.
well, I think also that innovation by definition feels a little chaotic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if you're in an organization that's not comfortable with a little bit of that,
right.
It's very hard to diffuse that innovation.
Would any of you guys maybe mind sharing a specific example without naming names of a failure and sort of what was that approach? I think anyone.
No.
I'll pass on that one too.
Next question.
We don't fail.
I'll share something quickly. With CGI, one of the epiphanies for us was we were saying all the industry buzzwords, digital transformation and
smart
organizational blah, 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 blah. And then we'd go write a 6,000-page project plan.
Right.
And I'm going, what are we doing? It's like we're saying the right things, but in fact, when we go to actually do something, we're overlaying all the same tired notions of linear thinking that really don't support the diffusion of innovation. So we had to retool internally to say, stop. We have to, even ourselves, become more comfortable with that's not how you have to do everything any longer.
Right. So Jason, for us, out in real time, we talk about being innovative as a utility, but it also means in a regulated situation, having a commission that is willing and to allow us to do what we are recommending or suggesting. And an example last year for BGE, we were trying to be innovative with microgrids, universal solar, and the like. And the commission flat out said no, with a lot of really positive language, but they said no. And what it came down to for us, and what I realized at that point with my team, I said, they liked the idea, but they didn't know if the utility, BGE, the largest utility in Maryland, should be playing in that area. And what I recognized at that point is that it was primarily because we suggested it. They thought we had an ulterior motive, that we were trying to push something. And since then, we've really worked with our stakeholders, legislators, mayors, and the like, to be the forward thinkers on recommending that BGE should consider. And it's amazing how successful that is we had to engage external parties earlier in the process and really work with them on the commission, because if it was our idea, it was not going to go anywhere. And that was the lesson learned. And it took us up because we were on the cutting edge. And we thought it was a layup. And they were like, no. So.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. Chris, any thoughts there?
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense what Calvin's saying. You know, we've brought ideas out there, and it's, okay, there's something going on here, but if we can partner with some of our stakeholders and we have a more common voice, or we have a voice that's really representative of our entire community, that same idea goes from a bad idea to a great idea. So I echo that very much so.
Fantastic. So I want to turn the attention a little bit to the people, right? Because this is, at the end of the day, we can talk about technology and all the tools and all the process and roadmaps. A lot of us do that type of work. But how do we get the people to buy in? I know it starts with leadership and vision. You got this bottom-up approach sometimes. But what is that key? You know, how do we continue to inspire the people? Not just, and I'm not just talking internally employees, but customers got to come along too. And all of you represent very different communities too, and they're at a different level where they want to go with how they use their energy and engage with it. Some is highly regulated, some is municipal. So starting with people, Calvin, you want to talk a little bit about that, maybe from the internal standpoint?
From an internal standpoint, I think it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, really in connecting the dots, explaining the why. And once you really go out there and you have everyone singing off that same sheet of music, then sitting back, building a level of trust within your employee base, that you're not only saying the same things internally, you're saying them externally, and you're seeing the successes that are coming by the momentum that you're building. And I'll share this because we're proud of it. Just this past year, and I think this is something that has brought in a level of trust with our employee base. J.D. Power forever ranked BGE the #1 on the East Coast for customer service. A few years ago, we were number 9 out of 11. So what we've done with that is, one, we were proud of it, but we said, we got this recognition because of the efforts that you're putting in each and every day in changing how we interact with our customers. That's the success. That's the why. Yeah. And that's really what we're pushing. And we're giving them a broader meaning of what we stand for. What is the purpose of the organization? We talk about keeping the lights on and the gas flowing, but we're really impacting our communities at a deeper level based on who we are and how we're engaging with them. And I think they're resonating with the purpose of us, and outside of just being a electric and gas provider.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a customer perspective, I think our customers are well ahead of us in terms of knowing what they want. We've got major Fortune 500s that want to go predominantly 100% renewables. We've got just a broader customer base wanting more cleaner energy, higher quality of life, air quality. Those are important topics to them, and I think they are looking for someone to lead on those. I think what's a little bit challenging is I think they take the reliability aspect almost for granted. The lights are on, so everything's good. Just go do some more of this other stuff. And so we got to figure out how to do this other stuff, plus keep the lights on in a very reliable way. So I think that's part of the challenge, is to have that dialogue with the community to really understand, here's how we get there, but here's how we get there in an affordable and reliable way for our community.
Excellent. Jeff, anything there?
I guess I always say that if you could take that pesky people thing out of organizations, it would be a lot easier. But I think two things are key. One is tied directly to what Calvin said, is that why is so important. If you think of some of the most inspirational leaders, people didn't show up on the National Mall because Dr. King told them. They showed up because they believed what he believed. And I think that applies organizationally. And I think the second piece is that in organizations, we know for a fact that people who feel safe in that environment, safe to explore, safe to think outside the lines sometimes, and there's incentive to do that organizationally in a safe environment, are much more innovative, much more productive. So I think those, from a people perspective, those things are key. The why and that safe environment to be able to flourish.
Sounds great. Yeah, so part of taking that why aspect, I think there's a national attention on the why of how we addressed the recent hurricanes. And Cris, this is probably specifically for you, and if you guys want to chime in, that'd be great. But what are those lessons learned from Puerto Rico and Harvey, Maria? One, it was, I had to talk to Tom Kuhn a few days ago, and it was fascinating of all the people that were mobilized, 60,000, 200,000, and to bring that together as an industry. I think this is probably all why we do and why we're here. We really care and we're passionate about it. But what do we do right, and what could we have done better? And I know you've been there, and maybe share some of that with the audience.
Yeah, so the industry does a great job on mutual assistance. When a community or city is in need, the industry just rallies and comes there, helps. We have lineman crew that are out there helping restore power in Florida and Harvey in Texas. But one area that I've gotten involved here recently over the last several months is Puerto Rico. We do have some employees there that are helping the restoration effort, but I'm also co-chairing a transformation advisory council for Puerto Rico to think about what does that utility of the future look like there. Let's take this opportunity where there's a blank canvas and really put a system that's resilient, that's sustainable, that's customer-centric in place there. Let's take this opportunity. And when I was down there several weeks back, I was taking the cab from the airport to the hotel, and I was talking to the cab driver. The cab driver said, what are you in Puerto Rico for? I said, well, I'm helping with the power. And he said, right out of his mouth was, please do not let them build back the same system. And so, it was germane that, we've got to think differently about how to do things down there. Not just there, but across all of our areas, because with, climate change, resiliency is becoming much more of an important topic. So we're excited about our work down there. There's some pretty cool technologies, everything from the latest one I saw a couple weeks ago was setting up 3D printers to actually manufacture infrastructure, poles. So instead of having 100,000 poles on a barge for weeks and days, you just set up a 3D printer and you just start to print this stuff out there in Puerto Rico. So there's some pretty cool technologies that you can apply there beyond solar and microgrids that I think is unique to Puerto Rico because there's that opportunity to do things differently there.
Yeah, so just kind of one follow-up is you were there, and you guys, I know you've done, I think there was a recent report maybe put out or we're working on. Any one or two things you see that as industry we could have done better, any sort of Monday morning quarterback point of view?
I don't think that story is just over yet.
Yeah.
It is truly a very interesting situation. There's a lot of politics going on. There's technology. There's restoration. There's a human story there. It's a very complex set of issues. My biggest concern is that they don't build it like for like, and a lot of the recovery dollars that are flowing into Puerto Rico are specifying if the pole was there, you got to put the pole there. You have to build a like for like infrastructure. And so there's going to be a part of that, but I think the real opportunity there is to do something different, and we're working very, very hard, both in D.C. as well as in San Juan, to accomplish that.
Fantastic. You guys have anything to add?
I would just sit back and say, from an Exelon Utilities perspective, we have several hundred employees. They're down there now for their second deployment and it's amazing the reaction that our employees are receiving from being down there to help. Mm-hmm. There's a human element that being here that we lose sight of because can you imagine any of our neighborhoods being out of power for 5 to 6 months? We wouldn't stand for it. But yet we let, to Chris's point, the politics or the lack of service agreements get in the way of sending resources down to get people's power back up. We were ready to go almost less than 30 days after. We were ready to send our employees down. Our employees were asking us, what are we going to do? And the fact that we had to hold up for 60 to 90 days later says a lot about what we need to do as an industry to get it right and partnering with our federal government to make sure the resources are there. So our employees, we put videos in place, and when you talk about the purpose of who we are, when we shared those videos, the purpose of who we are resonated.
Yeah.
They saw it, and that's what's powerful.
Yeah.
You guys have a really intimate relationship with the community there. And if you could just talk a little bit about Light City, why it's important, why it's helping create a creative community, and also inspire innovation. Yeah. And I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, thank you for asking. You know, for us, my team probably gets tired of hearing this. I quote probably badly Maya Angelou, where I sit back and say, people don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that is the drive of our community engagement, is that we want people to see us as part of their neighborhoods, part of their communities, in there with them, our sleeves rolled up, not just in the money we give, but the hours that we invest. So Light City, specifically to your question, Light City was really, it's interesting, we're here in Austin, because it was mirrored off of South by Southwest.
Okay.
We saw what an event like this can do for a city. And several years ago, they approached me about would BGE consider being the lead sponsor, and I didn't know anything about Light City. But in essence, in short, what it is, it's a festival of art and social innovation. And when we started talking about it, I didn't know that we were going to have the uprising in 2015 with the death of Freddie Gray. But it became even more important in Baltimore that we shine a light on our city to give a different message than the narrative that was put out on CNN and across the country about Baltimore. So we stepped in. I stepped in as chairman of the event, and I'll tell you, we had over 500,000 people come down to the Inner Harbor, all colors, all races, all genders, to sit back and celebrate. And I was quoted as saying, you know, Baltimore needed a hug. And I was proud to be the driver, one of the drivers, in making that happen. I continued to chair it the next year, and we continued to give money towards it. But the whole purpose of it was we saw a need, and we went to fulfill that need. And we was part of our 200th anniversary, and we continue to do things like that. We talked about the baseball field that we dedicated in West Baltimore, where the uprising happened, in partnership with Cal Ripken Senior Foundation. You know, it's my love for baseball, so I got to get in some way. So we put a baseball field in West Baltimore where Freddie Gray lived, because those young kids needed a safe place to play, and we wanted to build them a state-of-the-art ball field to sit back and say, you're not forgotten, and this is where we're going to be, and this field will be there long after we're gone. So
that's fantastic. And so before we turn it over to audience questions, talking a lot about digital, I have to ask Jeff this, because it does tie into how we evolve the workforce. So there's a lot of talk about IoT, AI. Is there any specific part of the utility operations that you think are going to be impacted first, or will be the most impacted from what you see?
Yeah, I mean, I heard a lot about it yesterday, you know, when when people talk about, you know, some people tend to focus on the actual devices. I think, you know, where the challenge is going to be and where a lot of the opportunity is going to be is in the data itself. And so I know I heard people talk a lot about BI. I'm particularly interested, and I wanted to ask yesterday, but obviously there's not a lot of time for questions. But, we deal a lot with mobile workforce management, for instance. And when you talk about mobile devices with field crews, you've got a host of data coming in from those types of things that can be used for all sorts of things that relate directly to your bottom line. So I think that field is going to continue. IoT is going to continue to evolve. I think it's a bit of a challenge to figure out how to best apply the technology and how best to sort through everything that you're collecting from use of that type of technology.
Okay. You guys got anything to add about some of the emerging tech? Yeah. All right, Aaron, I'll turn it over to you for some questions from the audience.
All right. We've had a lot of good ones come in. So I think this one's for for all the panelists. If you could choose one new public policy to help drive your organization's industry, what would it be?
I mean, I would say a price on carbon. I think, all these technologies that we talk about and these paths that we go down, uncertainty, and we had the Clean Power Plan, now we don't have the Clean Power Plan, and however you shake out on that, it seems like our society is going to decarbonize our cities, our country, and, I think that would be something that would give the industry certainty, our customers certainty to move forward.
I like that one. That's good. That's good.
Next one, Aaron.
Somebody else from Excellent.
Okay, this one's for Calvin. Can you discuss how Exelon utilities are collaborating together on implementing innovation across the enterprise?
Yes. So a couple of ways. One, we are very strategic in how we partner together from a best practices standpoint, but I also think one of the most powerful things about celebrating, going back to our questions, celebrating innovation and encouraging it, every year Exelon hosts what we call our Innovation Expo. Last year it was done in D.C. at the Ronald Reagan Trade Building. This year it's going to be at the Convention Center, where we bring employees from across the country in, all about innovation, and we invite our stakeholders. And those ideas that are submitted throughout the year, they have poster contests.
Wow.
And they sit back, and you sit back, and we have speakers come in, and you sit back and see their level of engagement and excitement from being invited and participating. That is really where the innovation jumps off, because we talk about it out all year, and then in the summer, we get to bring it all together and celebrate it. And then you sit back and reward those best ideas with monetary success. So it's good.
Excellent. Next one, Aaron.
Okay. How often do you incorporate user research into your product or project validation process? And that would be the questions for both internal and external projects.
I'll say this. It's that I'm often quoted as saying, we can make anything sound good if we get in a room long enough. And we've engaged in crowdsourcing. We've engaged with the process. We have a partnership with University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Yeah, those retrievers who beat Virginia. We have, there you go. We have some of their best students where we ask them to come in on a monthly basis, and we ask departments who have new ideas to bounce the ideas off them. And it's amazing how humbling it is when they tell you it's not good or tweak it, because, again, we're thinking internally, and that external perspective really goes a long way. And we've also developed local advisory councils across the 9 counties that we serve. Movers and thought leaders in those counties we meet with once a month to sit back and bounce ideas off them, and they also share with us what we're doing well, our information. So a lot of times there are eyes and ears on the ground. We've never done that before, and this has all been developed in the last couple of years, and that is how we really test ideas and test. We don't do a regulatory filing without talking to those local councils about how is it going to be perceived in our neighborhoods and our communities, again, because we're a part of it.
All right.
Yeah, I would also say, not enough. We need to do a lot more in terms of customer input into how we think about new products and services. I think that's a lot of upside there for us. And not just the ideas, but how they integrate into something that's meaningful and of value to our customers. Obviously we do focus groups and things like that, but sourcing new technologies, I think there's real upside there for that.
What do you see your customers doing?
Yeah, I think we do it all the time.
Yeah.
But I think we have transitioned from this notion of an annual user group. CGI has a lot of IP. 98% of it was developed in collaboration with clients for a real business reason. And so one of the transitions we've made is to say, hey, as we're actually doing these projects with our clients, that's an awesome opportunity to also continually intake that input. Now, the disposition of that input, there's multiple ways we do that, but we've come to the conclusion that it needs to be a constant input from as many sources as possible. And I was going to try to get some sports reference in, Calvin, but I'm a Saints fan, and so
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
almost not
So
worth.
I'll steal one more question here. So I think backstage we're talking about being able to attract not just the engineers, but these young data scientists, these young folks in STEM. But part of that is also helping build that excitement for STEM early. And I know a lot of you are involved in some of these projects and maybe sharing some ideas or what you guys are doing to do that for that new workforce, or maybe if they're new employees, hey, I want to keep that guy. I want to keep this young lady. How do we train them? So maybe share some of that, because I know we do have a good group of a younger audience. So then we'd love to hear what you guys are doing there, or some suggestions.
Well, okay, I'm probably getting over my skis on this, but I think the whole concept of learning is going to change in itself. I mean, I've got two 16-year-old boys, and the way they learn and do homework, it's almost like a group homework. You know, they're texting back and forth about kind of how to solve that problem. So it's a much more dynamic feature in terms of the whole concept of learning. And also, we've got millennials. We have some sort of groups of employees that are of that tenure. And they want to move up faster. They don't want to be stuck in it. They don't want to wait 10 years to be a plant director. They want to have different experiences. And so under the People First leadership, we've taken a much more dynamic view on how to, you don't have to have these obviously if it's a technical job, you have to have qualifications, but we want to be as kind of flexible and loose on that as possible. Just my own experience, I've been a strategy guy for most of my career, and now I'm the operational guy, and I love it. And so part of what keeps life exciting is to have different experiences, learn from a different set of perspectives to get where you're trying to go to.
That's good.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that one of the things that I would encourage everyone to do is as you think about through innovation, that's going to be a kind of one of the key retention strategies is you can't go hire these bright young people who want to do these things and overlay a half-century old methodology or a way of doing things, because they're just not going to last. So I think the more you can infuse new ways of thinking and doing the things that you have to do, I think the more attracted they'll be. I mean, they grow up in an era where customer touch points are completely different than what some of us are used to from 10, 20 years ago. So I think you have to be aware of that and address it.
I'll address it from two standpoints. One is not just the young college graduates coming in, but even when we're going in and targeting high school students. I want BGE to be reflective of the communities that we serve. So that means race, gender, and all. And we start as early as in middle school in some cases, but high school, to encourage them that there are jobs in the energy sector that are for you. And then we bring people out and say, this is what they do. Did you ever think about that? So that's one. The second piece is that I encourage my leadership team to look around and say, if everyone sitting in that table has similar backgrounds, then we're not a really dynamic team. And we encourage rotation. As a matter of fact, in some cases, we force it. Because I want to mix it up in terms of the thought and the analytical process that happens around the table. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't, but it doesn't mean that that person is still not a high performer. It just means that fit wasn't right for that individual. I started out with, I'm a lawyer, but I run a utility company. And I was in the printing industry, but my background has been so varied, from operations to strategy to legal. I think it's helped me be a better CEO, and some would argue that's still yet to be determined. But it's one of those things that I feel I'm a more well-rounded individual because of the varied experiences. And so I encourage our young talent to think about that. Get out of your comfort zone, stretch yourself, and really think differently about what your career looks like.
Sounds good, sounds good. Aaron, if we have 50 seconds on the clock, we have a short question for the gentleman on stage.
Okay, can a vertically integrated utility actually evolve quickly enough for distributed future, or will they be stuck with stranded assets?
Well, speaking as a vertically integrated utility here, that's going to take more than 35 seconds. I think there's tremendous upside for a vertically integrated utility, because the more we do on the customer side, if we enable our customers to use less energy, we burn less fuel, we can retire a plant, we can monetize that. If we're just a retail electric provider, we can't monetize in the same way. on the other side of that, there are challenges. We made long investments, 40, 50-year investments, billions of dollars, and so there are costs that we've got to consider in that. But I think there's both opportunity and challenges being a vertically integrated utility.
All right.
1 second. There you go.
Excellent. Well, that about wraps it up. Any 2 seconds of wisdom on innovation and culture you want to leave the audience with?
I would just encourage, keep challenging us, keep pushing the industry to put customers first and to really engage and ask for input, because I think we're better when that's a process that's integrated in everything that we do.
Excellent. I think that's a great ending point. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to the ETS audience. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Good job, guys.
All right, man.